guys? Welcome back to Between the Pylons. I'm John Camacho. Thank you so much for watching. And guys, today we are breaking down the New York Giants 2021 draft class with all the trades. I'm going to be talking about trade value, trade breakdowns, all of that. I think you're going to like what I have to say about that. They had some great trades in this past weekend. I'm going to talk about all the players that were drafted in the first 3 rounds. I'll do my breakdown for those players. I'll give you my grades for their draft, best, worst move, some of my grades on the players' value and needs that they hit on in this draft. Before we do that, first of all, would you, if you wouldn't mind, hitting that like button if you do end up enjoying this video, and subscribe to the channel if you think you would enjoy more content from me. Let's get right into it. First, before we do any of the other things I mentioned, we got to look at the entire draft class as a whole, just kind of break it down here really quick. Get a Kadarius Toney in the first round, 20th overall, a little bit earlier than I expected, but right in his range. I feel like, he's a awesome talent and certainly has a chance to be a difference maker there for the Giants. Azeez Ojulari is a guy who I thought had a really good chance to go first round. They get him with the 50th pick. Great value. Can't beat that at all. And then Aaron Robinson, another corner to add to a cornerback backfield that was certainly better than I expected. And then moving through the draft class, grab a running back late, grab another cornerback, really attacked defense for the most part, other than the wide receiver early and a running back late, which you always want to grab. I always believe, hey, grab a running back every year. You can always use them, especially, the Giants know what it's like to lose their star running back, and I've always been a draft running back late, draft running back, late and often. That's the kind of my mindset when I look at the NFL draft. But getting right into it, let's break down their first pick. And before we talk about Kadarius Toney, I do want to quickly mention the trade because they got great draft value, and obviously I think everybody knows Giants were really eyeing a Devontae Smith. Well, it doesn't work out. The Eagles made a good move. They traded up one spot ahead of them and was able to grab a Devontae Smith out from under him, just making that division rivalry all the sweeter. You got to love the storyline that comes from that. But just to look at the trade breakdown, when they realized, we're not going to give Devontae Smith, our next wide receiver on the board is Kadarius Toney, and they clearly were not willing to stray from the plan as far as grabbing a wide receiver in the first round. And they end up moving back with the Bears, grab an extra first next year, grab an extra fourth next year, get a fifth this year. And I think the Giants did a really good job of going back, making the move, understanding draft value a little bit, and not panicking when a team made a good move and got ahead of them to grab their guy, right? And it has been confirmed, I think, by the Giants that they were going to take a Devontae Smith. So that's not conjecture. That is a near certainty, I feel like, at this point. But just looking at Kadarius Toney, let's break down Kadarius Toney here. And Kadarius Toney is, honestly, he was one of my favorite wide receivers. He was my 5th wide receiver, but he was one of my favorite watches. Just an explosive, athletic superstar. Just explosiveness, athleticism. It jumps off out to you. Ball in his hand ability is great. Now, listen, he's not a receiver that you're going to put on the outside. His route running is just okay, but it did improve every year. That's the big thing. And honestly, I think he's going to go into that wide receiver room and from day one just be a different kind of human compared to all the other guys they have. Because you look at that wide receiver room, they got a Kenny Golladay in free agency, which I do think was a good pickup. He's going to be their number 1 wide receiver, traditional number 1. You have a Darius Slayton out of Auburn, a late round pick that's really hit and is a viable, number 3 to number 2 kind of option, right? Now you bring in a Kadarius Toney to just mold that into, now you have a speedster, now you have a weapon. And that's the difference. All those other guys, they're wide receivers, they can do a lot with the ball in their hand. There's some good players there. There's certainly some talent to talk about, especially once they got Kenny Golladay. You could have argued, okay, the wide receiver room, not fixed, but certainly improved enough to where they didn't have to go wide receiver first round. But man, they did not have a weapon like a Kadarius Toney. And obviously a Devontae Smith would have been another animal. Obviously we know that, but that didn't happen for him. So they get a Kadarius Toney, and really, if Kadarius Toney had the route running that a Devontae Smith had, he'd be a better prospect in my mind. And listen, I know that's a crazy thing to say. I love Devontae Smith. He was my number 2 wide receiver this year. I thought he was great. The explosiveness, athleticism, all those things pop, right? But there is the argument that Kadarius Toney has every bit of the explosiveness and athleticism from a Devontae Smith. It's comparable. It certainly is. Now, Devontae Smith is a far smoother wide receiver, route runner, all of those other things that go into it. That's the difference, right? So Kadarius Toney certainly has the potential to be be what Devontae Smith I think is coming into day one. So I think that's the difference. And hey, you moved down in the draft, you paid for like maybe that teardrop at wide receiver, and it is what it is. I think they got a really good player. I know I spent a lot of time on Kadarius Toney. Let's move on to Azeez Ojulari. But before we do, we again have to talk about the trade that they made with my Miami Dolphins. And I'm not gonna lie, I did not like this trade. You can go, I didn't like this trade at all. They moved up 8 spots in the second round. For my Miami Dolphins, I didn't like the trade. So as a Dolphins fan, I didn't like the trade. For the Giants, it was awesome. So let me reframe this for Giants fans probably watching. For the Giants, this was an awesome trade for you guys. You move down 8 spots. First of all, you get a guy who was projected to go first round anyway. Maybe that was never a real thing, or all those things you could mention, but a guy who certainly had first round buzz. You get him, and you get a third round next year. And when you just talk about it in a vacuum for value, you talk about the difference between the 42nd pick in the draft and the 50th pick. It's not worth a third round pick. And the Giants were able to get a third round pick. And I think, hey, that's Dave Gettleman. Like, we always talk about Dave Gettleman not being able to trade, and he finally learned to trade back this year and all those things, right? And he did a great job in round 1 trading back when he knew he had to. Round 2, I'm going to be honest, this to me screams he didn't want to trade back. I think he was comfortable where he was, and the Dolphins made an offer that he could not refuse based on his board, based on draft value. If it got out that he refused this trade, I mean, guys like me would have been real mad and would have been talking a lot of shit. So yeah, I think they made a slam dunk move, and it adds to the fact that they made that slam dunk move when they get an Azeez Ojulari, who let's move right along to Azeez Ojulari. He's that outside linebacker edge rusher out of Georgia. Has the prototypical frame. Just built like an Adonis, honestly. Aggressive, physical, player. Incredible burst. He is raw from a pass rushing moves standpoint, and I did think he struggled a little bit with strength at the point of attack and setting the edge and all those things. He certainly is strong. That's why I didn't put that in there as a con, but I thought he struggled to set the edge and really, be in force from a physical standpoint. I thought he was a lot more of an athlete and athleticism standpoint that he really just shined. And really, hey, they're grabbing another edge rusher out of Georgia. I loved Lorenzo Carter coming out in 2019, no, 20, I don't know, it's either 18 or 19. I loved Lorenzo Carter coming out of Georgia. I thought he was a guy who had a lot of potential, and I really thought, popped a little bit from a couple games that I specifically watched of their offense this past year, 2020 season. So grabbing another guy, and I think, you could say similarities to him, maybe not quite as long as a Lorenzo Carter, but certainly has some similarities there, and I think has a ton of potential. There's a reason he was being talked about, being flirting with that first round kind of conversation. This is a guy I certainly like, and I'm certainly really happy for the Giants to grab another guy to fit on that defensive line and just add to the names that they already have. They're beefing up this D line. This Giants team, listen, they were a little bit lacking of talent, and I think they're getting some really good players that are going to come in and produce right away. So you gotta love that. And then moving on to the third round, they did get a cornerback out of UCF, Aaron Robinson, a little bit smaller, 5'11", 186. I mean, that's what cornerbacks used to be in the NFL. Now it seems like every corner that goes in the first 2 rounds are like 6'1" or some shit like that. So hey, but this is a guy, I think, versatility. I don't have a problem with him on the boundary. I don't have a problem with him in nickel. I don't have a problem with him really anywhere. I think he's a great athlete, good tackler. So you can, that's why you can trust him as the nickel, nickel corner who maybe has to help in run defense and things like that. Just average instincts, doesn't have like the greatest ball skills in the world, a little too much busted coverage, and I always struggle with stuff like that because it's like, I'm not gonna pretend to know anything I don't know. So there's certain situations where it's like, okay, it looks like that was him, but maybe it wasn't. Like maybe he had no reason to be there, but he just was because he's the best athlete on the back end, and he's trying to do everything he can to win, and it just looked like it was his fault, right? So I always say that, and I always give that little grain of salt, because especially for UCF, it's like, man, I don't have an in-depth knowledge of how UCF plays defense. I assume, and I come at it from the standpoint that it's some of the more basic concepts that I know about, and I know pretty well. I feel pretty confident that I got the basic concepts down as far as defense schematically. But if there's some nuance there, and there's some trickery that I'm just not aware of, that's very possible. So I put that out there. Maybe he wasn't as many busted coverages as I noticed. And I already mentioned, obviously, smaller guy. So I think that's why he does fall the third round. This is another guy. Listen, I think he's adding into a defensive backcourt that I thought played a lot better than they had any right to play last year. James Bradbury, top 5 corner in the league last year. Really, just shocked me. The guy who played for the Panthers, him, just played out of his mind. I thought he was awesome. I thought he played great for the Giants last year. Didn't think he got nearly enough credit, and it just surprised me. I think the first 4 or 5 weeks of the year, every single week, I did betting shows, and I was big into prop bets and things like that, and I still am. But I would always look at the Giants and be like, man, their defensive backfield's terrible, right? And then all of a sudden I had to flip it. I'm like, man, this wide receiver might have to face James Bradbury, and James Bradbury's been awesome all year. So what am I, what are you supposed to do to that? What are you supposed to say to that? So yeah, that was always kind of a funny thing. It was like, man, James Bradbury was awesome. They brought in a Logan Ryan, played that safety nickel. Logan Ryan does a lot of good things really well, and just is a prototypical, Patriot style DB who can do pretty much anything and do, he's technically a safety, but he lines up all over the defense, and they do a lot of different things with him. So they have pieces there. I certainly think they could stand to add some more. Thought they played really well for what they had as far as a personnel standpoint. Aaron Robinson adds to that personnel, and hopefully can start. He's going to have an opportunity to. Certainly going to have an opportunity to start right away. And as a third round pick, you certainly hope that for the Giants' sake that he can do that. Let's move on to some of my final thoughts. Let's first talk about my best and worst move. My best move was their trade downs. They traded down twice in this draft, in the first and second round. I'm gonna put them on the board right here. They basically acquired an extra first, second, and fourth in the next year's draft. So that tells you kind of how they felt about this draft. They weren't trying to acquire more picks in this draft because they didn't have as much information as they are certainly used to. So that makes sense. And obviously all the players that I think they got either fit right in the range that I saw for them, or was a nice little steal. So the overall, just a value overall, they did a really good job. But trade down specifically, that's certainly my best move for them. And then for my worst move, and listen, before I really get into it, I do want to say I struggled with this one. I didn't have a really bad move because I really liked their draft overall. But this is slightly nitpicky, but I'm going to say not grabbing an offensive line at all in this draft. And really, the fact that they didn't even go for one later, I look at any team that doesn't have a great offensive line should always at least get somebody. And in a draft that was pretty deep at offensive line for the most part, especially the tackle position, was really surprised they didn't try and get some value on a 4th or 5th round offensive lineman that maybe could have been pushed up in the 2nd or 3rd round in a normal year, where there's almost always a lack of top end offensive line talent, right? So we're kind of used to that, and that's why I was certainly surprised. It is what it is. I know they're getting Nate Soldier back. I'll be honest, I didn't think Nate Soldier played great in the 2019 season, so we'll see what we get from him. We'll see if he is able to be that rock star at left tackle. They obviously have Andrew Thomas who's coming back, and well, actually maybe Andrew Thomas is playing left tackle. Not sure exactly how they're doing that. Doesn't matter. Whatever. They have a Will Hernandez there, so that's a pretty good guard. They got the 2nd round a couple of years ago. So I do like him. That's a good, I guess, core for the most part. But I certainly think there's pieces to add there. And I was just surprised they didn't go lineman at all. Just kind of weird for a team that certainly had offensive line issues for the past couple of years. So yeah, that's my worst move. Moving on to my grades. My first grade for the players they got is an A, just straight up A. I like all the guys they got. I've waxed poetic long enough on this video. I don't really have anywhere else to go. I like the guys they got. Kadarius Toney was one of my guys. I loved him at wide receiver. Azeez Ojulari, really liked him. Thought he was a really good player out of Georgia. Just overall, really like the players they got. Draft value A+, A++, man. They did great with draft value. They killed it. Obviously, I already mentioned in length their draft trades. I've hit that enough. You understand why that's certainly a great value for both of those trades they made. But really, just beyond that, grabbing guys in the right range. Understanding, hey, Kadarius Toney, we're going to trade back to 20. We need wide receiver, so we're not going to move back anymore to play, risk fates or anything like that. But hey, we're going to grab a Kadarius Toney in the 1st round, moving back in the 2nd and still getting Azeez Ojulari. You gotta love that. You gotta love both those moves. I thought that was just awesome value. I really loved love that. And then needs, I'm giving it a B. Yeah, I was surprised they didn't go offensive line. I already mentioned that. I was surprised. Overall, they had a lot of needs, so it's not a bad grade by any means. I think they hit all their needs. I think they got better this past weekend. They certainly improved their football team, and I think overall, the guys they got are going to start. But I can get really nitpicky in like the 6th round. I'm not going to do that. I don't really feel like that's a viable reason or reason to knock anybody down. But just in general, offensive line, surprised they didn't go that direction. Surprised they didn't try and get like another safety or something in the back end. They obviously got an Aaron Robinson, but he'll be corner probably. Maybe they convert him safety. I don't know. We'll see. But overall, guys, I really like this draft. I look at the Giants, and I really do. I look at the Giants very similarly to the way I looked at the Dolphins in that 2019 season, right? The Giants outperformed what they were probably supposed to do in the 2020 season. They played really well. They fought like hell. They had a lot of young players playing hard, doing everything they can. And really, like, I make that connection to the Dolphins in 2019. The 2020 season for the Miami Dolphins was way better than anybody expected. They won 10 games. I think the Giants could be in that exact same boat. I think it's going to be way better than anybody expects. They're going to win like 10 games. Not 10 games, maybe 9 games, maybe 8 games, whatever it is. I think they're going to play better than we're certainly expecting. And hey, I think the 2022 season has a chance to be really special for the Giants. So we'll see what happens. Obviously, all hinges on Daniel Jones and how that works out, but we'll see. Guys, I'm going to get out of here. Thank you so much for watching. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff. We'll see you next time. Peace.